Hey everyone, and welcome to the Tune and Strong podcast. I am Angela McCuiston of Music Strong, joined by
Veronika Klírová. I've been asked to say my name because I know it's a pickle.
That's quite all right. And my co-host.
Yep. I am Dr. Jen Cabasmay of Tuned and Tone Performance.
And we are joined by Veronika, whose last name is hard to say.
Right.
Okay, great.
How do you say your last name?
It's Klírová.
Oh, okay.
But you know, you don't have to.
Okay.
It's fine. It's fine.
Okay.
So, Veronika, where are you in the world? Where are you from?
I am in the universe, the Earth, Birmingham, UK.
Okay.
That narrows it down.
So yeah, that's where I'm now. But as you can probably tell from my last name, I grew up in the Czech Republic, so it's not a British name.
Okay.
Yeah.
No.
I wasn't.
So
I
this
wasn't
is quite
sure.
nice. It's a kind of transatlantic podcast interview.
Yeah.
It is. I
Yeah.
think this is our second.
Should be third at least, because you talked to Yannick.
Yannick.
Yeah, and then we talked to, it's Christine? Is she the one who's in?
Oh, Christine. Yes, she's in Sweden, I think.
Yeah. I was
Yes.
like, pretty sure it was Christine who's in Sweden and not somewhere else.
Yes. So we've had an interesting start to this morning. So you are our third transatlantic interviewee, and you are also a musician, and you play flute just like I do, which is fun. So,
Yeah.
but you've got kind of an interesting story. So why don't you tell us a little about you and a little about your story?
Yeah, okay, why not? That's why I'm here. So yeah, I have a kind of two lines of work at the moment. So one is I'm a flute player. I work as the principal second flute of the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra. It's a mouthful. And I also sort of delve into performance well-being. So I have a business called Musicians Yoga with Veronika. So I help musicians prevent injury and burnout and kind of, have sustainable careers.
Right.
So yeah, those are the main two things I do at the moment.
Okay.
How did you get? Go
Go ahead.
No. I was going to say, but you're also not a stranger to lifting heavy things, right?
No, yeah, and that's the relevant thing for this podcast. I really love, resistance training and strength training, which is a fairly recent thing, sort of the last year and a half or something like that. It hasn't always been like that. So yeah, but I'm enjoying it.
Yeah. What got you into it?
That's an interesting. It was an interesting way in. So actually, a yoga teacher friend. So at the time, I was kind of starting to do more private sessions, and I thought, well, if I'm gonna teach them, I might as well, take some myself. And so I asked this friend to give me a private, and I kind of mentioned a few issues I was dealing with, and she was very good about it, because she first of all sent me a couple of podcast interviews with yoga teachers talking about resistance training, right? Because I was kind of in that mindset of like, oh, yoga is all I need, it's everything, and I don't really need, whatever strength training or anything else. So she sort of piqued my interest that way. And then the private itself, she basically gave me a few really sort of simple resistance exercises, really sort of low load, but they really made such a difference. So yeah, she really kind of got me on that path, and she also recommended a personal trainer. So they put together a gym sort of strength training routine for me, and I was working for them for about a year and a half until this June. Yeah, and yeah, that was kind of my way in. But I do feel like it really sort of was sort of the last piece of the puzzle for me in the sort of well-being, area where sort of it all came together, right? That was what was missing for me, even though I didn't know for a long time, I think.
Yeah, I think that's in my experience, that's a pretty common story for people who've gone sort of like the calm yoga end of things first, is like, oh no, but I feel so good all the time when I just and then you get into a little bit of strength work and you're like, oh, okay, this is a balance.
Yeah, right. I mean, I do think, I mean, they go hand in hand. Like they like, you need like variety, right? So it's not like yoga is going to give you everything, and it's not like just strength training is going to give you everything. But I would like, you know, I think prioritize strength at the moment for me. Like I do yoga consistently as well, but if it was between like choosing whether to do lots of cardio or things like that, I would prioritize strength over that for sure.
What kind of benefits have you seen when it comes to your playing, when it with like the crossover between strength training and your playing? Have you seen any benefits with that?
Well, the one benefit was that so part of the reason why I got into yoga, right, and when like 10, 11 years ago was because of playing the flute, right? So I was in pain with my back, and it's been really helping. But, you know, there was always that one sort of little niggle like that, just, you know, just kept persisting. So I think that kind of, you know, if I do it consistently, that doesn't happen anymore. So, you know, back pain is one thing, definitely. But I think for me, it was also like a mindset shift, because, you know, I think that, you know, you can't really separate like mind and body, right? Like, I would say that, like, coming from the sort of line of work that I do.
Right.
But, you know, I'm naturally more flexible than strong. So that's part of the reason why I liked yoga, right? Because, you know, we sort of gravitate towards doing things that we're good at. So, and I'm tiny bit hypermobile, like not massively, right? But on the scale, maybe 3. So I was kind of leaning into my flexibility quite a bit. And then it was kind of a shift when I started doing weights. I didn't really expect the first session with the personal trainer, like they got me doing like deadlifts and stuff like that. I was like, I wasn't expecting this, you know, but it was brilliant, you know. Yeah, I mean, the one sort of when you actually like lift something that's your weight, I mean, oh my God, like you would never think that would happen. And really, like, I don't think like if you do that, it doesn't manifest in your life or in, you know, the way you are as a person. It's not just separate to that like private session and then you forget everything. I really think it also kind of you feel more confident, like it's a different, you know, you feel differently when once you do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Confidence is huge when it comes to lifting. There's something really empowering about being able to pick up something heavy and set it somewhere else.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I really enjoy it. I mean, it is like something that's really sort of like visceral when you like, you know, you've done a workout and you're walking home, and it's a really even a different way you walk, and you feel, you know, it's yeah. I feel it does make a difference in that way.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So what about, let's talk about your business, which is Musicians Yoga with Veronika. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So so I started yoga when I was about 20, and really it was sort of came under the umbrella of, I was looking for something to help me with back pain from playing the flute, basically. And I've tried different things, and I thought about it, and I had like a little routine put together for me even at the gym, but somehow I didn't stick with it, and it wasn't really musician specific. It wasn't, you know, considering what I was doing at all. But, you know, I started playing in orchestras when I was 19, and that was really about that time when you start to feel like, okay, this is quite demanding, and I better like do something, you know, to take care of myself, otherwise this is not going to go well. And yeah, I was a student and I was just looking for something really affordable. So I found this voucher online, right? Like 10 yoga sessions, and I went and then only realized that it was hot yoga. So it was a bit of a shock.
Oh. Ooh, okay.
But it was amazing. Like actually, like that it really fit me, and yeah, I just was hooked. And I do the thing at the time, definitely as a music college student, I was like putting so much pressure on myself. I think there was already pressure anyway, but you know, the way I didn't know how to cope with it really at the time, the way I maybe would now. And it was kind of like a place where I could sort of escape, almost like I have a sanctuary and just let go of all that. And it was making me feel good. So it was kind of like a natural sort of progression then to want to teach it as well, because it was helping me. And it really took a few years. I also, you know, and I also am kind of thankful to a friend, a yoga teacher friend, who kind of kept asking me about it, because I was being a bit perfectionist about it, just thinking like, oh, when I've been practicing for 10 years, maybe I do my teacher training, or like, you know, like I'm not experienced enough. But they kind of kept bugging me like, okay, when are you doing your training? When are you doing your training? And so I finally did in 2018. And I feel like that was kind of where it all came together for me, because up until then I was doing classes, right? And so that's mostly like the physical practice and maybe a little bit of breathing, and not really meditation that much. But the training was quite intense. So we did all that, but also, you know, quite a lot of meditations. So for me, going from like doing a few minutes at a time to like 45 minutes a day, I was just dreading it every day. It was really, like, for me, it was a challenge for sure, but it really made a difference. Like, right, it wasn't comfortable, but it really helped me. And, you know, like learning about the philosophy and all of that, and being at that place, it really sort of, it all came together. And I just kind of thought like, well, this is really not just gymnastics, is it? And yeah, it kind of like dawned on me that it's really about the relationship you have with yourself, like that practice. And I remember sitting in I don't know if it was a philosophy class or something like that, and I was like, wow, this would be really great for musicians. Like that, like light bulb. And then of course, like once you start looking into it, like I'm not the first person, of course, to like think that, right? That wasn't like, I didn't invent that. But yeah, like since then I started doing classes at the orchestra first, and then kind of widen it. And I went online last year, which kind of was a good decision for me. I really like it. Like I like being able to sort of, you know, connect with people, and it works like so surprisingly well. Like how much actually translates in a live stream. Like I was surprised actually to, yeah, like that it is like you hold space for people, and it works. So yeah, that's my little yoga story.
So you're holding classes, is what you're doing online?
So I've been doing group classes, and now at the moment I'm concentrating more on privates, because I feel like, you know, there's only so much you can do in a group class, and if you have like 10-15 people there, like you have to kind of dial back and give advice that's, you know, you can't personalize it to that person. So that's kind of where I'm at now.
I relate to that a lot. I'm not a big fan of group classes myself. Because for that same thing, you know, you can't give that kind of individualized attention to somebody. It's hard to check their form. It's harder to like coach when you're, you know, it's not just about, well, in training anyway. A lot of trainers that do group coaching, they not everybody, but I'm thinking like specifically the ones at my gym. There's this one guy, I don't know how his business model works, but I'm pretty sure he's got like a revolving door policy, because he trains the same people, but he never trains all the same people at the same time. And it could be 2 people, and then suddenly there's 5, and then there's 7, and then there's 2 again. Like people come and go during that hour of quote personal training, and he's not watching them all. He's like, go do this, go do this, go do this. He's got some people doing burpees over here and some people doing, I don't know what he makes. He makes up some really weird things, but like they're doing things over here and over here and over here. And it's just like, you're just getting people really to move and sweat. For
yeah, which is like, yeah, like movement is better than no movement, right? But then if you really, really want to sort of make an impact and for somebody to, make a shift in their life in terms of well-being, I do feel that at least having a teacher, definitely, because there's lots of stuff free online, which is great. I think, if people don't have the finances or they can't come to a class, but yeah, at least having a teacher and like, yeah, of course, the best thing is just having like the privates, like individual attention. But I do feel like there's also something to be said about group classes, right? Because there's that like energy. It's very different. I did, I have not been going now, obviously, like because of COVID, but I used to be going like a lot, and yeah, there's that. I guess there's something that you also can't replicate in a private. It happens in a group class, that kind of energy.
Yeah. But I think ideally for, I know at least me, I'm guessing for you guys too, if we were going to have people going into group classes, it would be somebody who's already done a lot of one-on-one work.
Yeah.
It's like, even the group workouts that, I've been to a lot of group workouts, been to some group yoga classes, all that, but no matter how good the person is who's running the session, you can't, you're going to get the most benefit out of it if you already kind of know what you're doing, like if I'm doing a group deadlifting session, it's going to be fine because I deadlift.
A group deadlifting session, that sounds great.
That's fine. Like deadlift workout, I got you, no problem, that's fine. But if you want me to learn how to do a handstand, I'm gonna need some help. Like I'm not good upside down.
Right.
And I mean, I do really feel like, right, for the teachers that like it's a hard task, like to cater for everyone and also to make it, so that the people that are advanced don't get bored and the people who are sort of newer don't feel like, okay, I can't do any of this. Yeah, it is a tough one. But I was gonna say something and I forgot. I think I was gonna say that I would probably like really annoy the shit out of like a yoga teacher now going to their class, because I'd just be doing like my own thing. It's like,
you're like, why am I paying to be here?
No, like I do have some teachers which I really like, where I really enjoy the classes, but then I also know like what works for me, and you get to know your body, and like you wouldn't necessarily follow each and every instruction if you know it's not good for you. Right? If you're more experienced. If you're a beginner, there's a point to it, like, right, the teacher has a reason for saying it. But if you know yourself and your body, then you would adjust.
Knowing how to regress or progress a certain exercise is really important. It's kind of funny. I had a client come in this week, and he's actually training his sister, not training, but he's basically making her do some exercise because she doesn't do anything. And I was like, does she like it? He's like, no, she hates it. I'm like, why are you making her do it? He goes, because she doesn't do anything. She just sits around the house. I was like, well, all right. I'm not going to downplay that. But he came in this week and he's like, I don't think she has any body awareness at all. She doesn't know how to XYZ. And he's like, well, maybe you could talk to her. I'm like, or I could train her, because I mean, he was asking like, how do I regress even this? I'm like, that's why I do my job, I mean, because he's trying to get her to deadlift like right off the bat. And this is a home workout. And like, she doesn't know where her ankles are or where her hips do, or I'm like, I'd leave that out for now. Let's start on the floor,
Yeah.
But so I mean, like understanding that kind of stuff about yourself is really important.
Yeah, and that's the first step, right? So if I was working with a client, like that's like for a lot of people, and I think even musicians, right? We kind of have this sort of habit of just like pushing through, like, yeah, I'm just gonna keep on going. And then you keep ignoring the signs the body is sending you, right? And I feel like it's kind of like, if you keep doing it for long enough, it's just, you get a little bit numb, right? Like you lose that awareness until the point where you get an injury, or like something happens where you really have to pay attention, because you can't actually go on anymore.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the thing that, like, hopefully I think people can, like, avoid, right? Because that's not ideal.
Right. I know that's a lot of what I think all three of us set out to do.
Yes.
Don't ignore the signs. Don't ignore them.
Please don't. So I'm curious, do you across the pond over there, do you kind of see the same things that we see, in orchestras or in your fellow musicians when it comes to injury rates, or, just like you said, just pushing through, I just got to get through this and I'll just rest later, or maybe I'll do some stretches, whatever. Do you see that kind of the same thing?
And I think you mentioned, like, did you say 90% of musicians get injured or something like that?
Yeah.
And, ever since I started teaching yoga, I start seeing the signs more, or seeing people like in rehearsal, and, like, that's my little, like, laboratory, because I sit at the back, right? So I see everything. No, I mean, oftentimes it comes from a good place, right? You want to do well. And then something that, like, a lot of musicians have in common, we're so conscientious. Like, I've been doing this market research projects, basically talking to musicians about well-being. And like, a lot of them, when you even ask, like, what's the most important thing to you? It's like, I want to get better. I want to get better at what I do. Like, I want to be better at my craft. It's like the topmost thing, like the biggest desire. So that being said, then, if it comes to, like, oh, should I pull out of this concert, should I pull out of this gig, it's like, it comes from a good place, right? You feel like, oh, I really don't want to let anybody down, and I don't want to just leave them and having to bring somebody else in. But actually, if you keep doing that, like, eventually you're going to get to the point where you're going to have a really serious injury or a really serious problem. And then you're going to be off for months. Like, how is that going to benefit anyone? So I think it comes from a good place, but it's a bit misguided. But yeah, totally. I do feel like there is that sort of pattern here as well. And also people not really talking about this. It's not something that people would come forward and, mention that they've had an issue, because it's kind of, I feel like it's seen as a weakness.
Yep.
Finally, here's somebody else bringing voice to this. We've said it over and over again, but I mean, like, you're thousands of miles away seeing the same thing.
It's the same. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't talk about it. We're it's like you said, I mean, it's seen as a weakness. What?
I mean, I've had a shoulder injury, right? 3 months ago, so or 4 months ago, right? So for me, I do know that actually, it's easy to say, like, oh yeah, people see it as a weakness, but it's really not. But once it hits you, you do. I mean, I did go through that process of, like, well, doubly so, right? Because for me, one, I'm a musician, and I'm a professional musician in an orchestra. So you go through that, like, initial sort of reaction as, okay, this shouldn't be happening to me because I should know better, right? And second, as a yoga teacher, right, as a wellness professional, then you're like, okay, I should be, able to take care of myself, right? But that's just not true. So that's the initial sort of reaction, and you have to kind of do some inner work around that. Even I had to, even though I work in that field. So, it's just that it's kind of easy to discount what you've been doing in terms of well-being when you have an injury, but you don't actually know how many injuries you've prevented. I mean, I went through 22 years of, like, flute playing and without an injury. So I think, and, like, some people are more prone to it. Some people might, be pushing themselves and somehow, like, get through without major issues. I don't know. So yeah, I think it needs to be more of an open conversation, because I think around the time, you know, I had the injury and I had to stop playing for a few weeks. And then I was listening to the radio, and there was some sort of sports news, and they were talking about cricket, and just, you know, mentioned like, oh yeah, this player had a knee injury, so they had to blah blah. I was like, huh. So they just say it like on the radio. You know, it's not a big deal. Like, it's just a high performance sport, as is music. So it happens, you know. It's not like a reflection of like whether you're a good musician or not. And certainly when you mention like 90% of musicians like go through that, I mean, yeah, like it's just not something that we should be holding in, or
right. And the number of people talking now about how music performance is micro athleticism. Okay, well, if we're going to talk about it like that, because it is like 100%, 100% it is, and we're all high performers, and we've all got that like high drive. If any other type of athleticism, all the Olympic stuff, if any of those can experience injuries, why is it so taboo and so like, oh, you've got an injury, we don't trust you kind of mentality? For us, it should be so normal, and it is. We're just not talking about it. We're like, oh, don't say anything, don't say anything.
Do you feel like musicians actually see themselves as small muscle athletes, like most?
Oh, absolutely
musicians? No, that's
absolutely
the thing, right?
And that's part of the issue. Is like, oh, we can talk about, oh, it's micro athleticism all day long, but then
I have come across like people getting a little bit like irritated with that statement.
Really?
But like in a sense that, oh, but it's more than just being an athlete, right? I'm not just moving my fingers. And
right,
I'm like,
you play your body,
yeah,
you play your instrument, your whole body.
But I'm sure, no, it's not, right?
They're
it's
talking
more
about
than
the
that.
mental, spiritual aspect of it, aren't they?
But then in the sense of the way you take care of yourself, that's what we mean, right? Like muscle athlete in the way that you have to sort of treat yourself, and the things that you have to do to maintain that career. It's not like discounting all of the other things that come into it. It's just yeah.
Well, and I'm gonna take a little tangent here if you guys don't mind, but having switched into, well, not switched into, but like now doing strongman, working with some of the weightlifters I was working with were wanting to be Olympic hopefuls. You know, that was their goal. Working with these kids in strength sports, I worked with football kids who some of them wanted to go pro if they could. Some of them were on track for that. I know that when I was younger, I thought, oh, I'm a musician, I'm an artsy kid, I'm a nerdy kid, and the jocks are over there. Y'all, we are the same brand of crazy. I know that I had my little chip on my shoulder when I was younger, but let me tell you, these kids are so endearing to me because we're the same brand of crazy. And they don't realize it either till we start talking. Oh, band kids are that kind of nuts. So like, I know we talk about, oh, well, we're putting ourselves out there, we're communicating, we're expressing. They feel like they're doing the same thing. Their language is very different, but they feel like they're doing the same thing. So the mentality is not that divergent, you know?
Do you mean it's like in sport, like versus music?
Yeah.
Do you feel like that we sometimes sort of idolize the sort of world of sport as like, oh, they have it all figured out? And I mean, and in some ways, I think that we are a little bit behind in terms of like performance well-being and all the support that you would get as a professional athlete, you know, as opposed to professional musician. But also they don't have it all like, it's not all perfect, and you know.
No, we're definitely, we've got our opposite imbalances. We're definitely behind in the physical, mental, emotional wellness, although we have invested, I think, a lot into the mental and emotional aspects. They're way more advanced on the physical stuff. There's still clearly problems with the number of injuries we see. I would say that they tend to have more personal awareness issues on that end. Tend to, not always, but tend to.
Yeah.
So I'm like, we're coming at the same thing, just from two ends. It's same brain crazy.
Yeah, it is interesting because I was at a workshop about injury prevention last year, and they asked the question like, okay, how is music different from sport? And somebody said, sports athletes don't train on injury, and I was like, what?
Yes, they do.
Of course they do.
All day. All day, every day, all day.
I mean, yeah, of course they do. They shouldn't, but they do.
They do.
So yeah, it's not all like, sport, you're like, sorted, and the music needs work. Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
We're both just a little obsessed about our same thing. They're obsessed about sports. We're obsessed about music. We come at it kind of the same way.
But I was listening to sorry.
Let's just say this really kind of grinds my gears. But
here comes the rant.
when we call each other, we're small muscle athletes. Why are we small muscle athletes? You don't play your flute with only your lips or only your fingers. Your shoulder, your back hurts. You play your flute with your back, with your shoulders, with your legs, with your hips, with your diaphragm, with your internal organs, you use your entire body to play your instrument. Why are we small muscle? Yes, we do. We have a whole lot more dexterity we have to worry about. We're not like brute force football, battering ram, using your entire body to do one brute force thing, but we are using our entire body to do one thing.
Yeah, in a way now that makes sense, right? Because I've been using that term as well, like myself, small muscle athletes, right, for musicians. But actually, and I wonder if that's actually one of the things that triggers people. Like, I'm not a small muscle athlete. Not
small.
I'm a big muscle athlete. No. Yeah. So maybe that's also another shift to.
Maybe it's a little bit of a tangent, but when I hear that, it's like, why are we small? So can we stop thinking we only play with this, like our hands? We don't. That's why I do what I do, is because I'm taking the body as a whole and looking how you play your instrument. I'm thinking about my third injury was a friggin' piccolo injury. Piccolo, it's tiny. It doesn't weigh anything, and that's not the point. When you spend so many hours in this position, and you are so focused and you forget about yourself from the neck down. I got to the point I couldn't put my arm down. When I say that, like my right arm was stuck bent, like my bicep was so tight, it hurt to straighten it. And then I couldn't breathe because I had this imbalance with my left, the front of my body basically, and the left back of my body. And those muscles got so compensated, it hurt to breathe. Like I would go into spasm just breathing. You can't tell me those are small muscles. You use it's small instrument, but it doesn't make any difference. We're athletes that use our entire bodies.
Yep.
And do you think it contributes then to people feeling like, if I do weights, like it's dangerous because I think that's a little bit of that, like, I want my fingers to move fast, so I can't really do weights.
Yep, that was a big thing. Actually, that was a big thing I was told when I was going through my stuff. Yeah, and I know that was a lot of thing. I posted a video. It was probably a year ago now of the Dinny pins that I have. So Dinny stones, Scottish big ass stones. And you have to pick them up with these rings that are, drilled into the thing. Anyway, you train those with rings that are attached to a pin that you put weights on, no problem. So I posted a video of me just kind of playing around with them for the first time. And one of my friends goes, "Wait, no gloves?" Like, okay. No,
gloves, right? The closed captioning went all the way on that.
Oh, no. The question was, wait, no gloves? Like, no. My hands are actually I feel safer with no gloves on because I can feel what's going on more quickly. You know, if there's a problem in there, I know immediately I can drop, and I'm not afraid to drop anymore.
And calluses don't get in the way of your playing.
They don't. I've heard people go, "Oh, well, my grip strength will slow me down." It hasn't slowed me down a bit. Not one bit.
I wondered about that. I wondered about that for a long time. Well, if I'm picking up really heavy things and I'm training my grip and all these kinds of things, will I lose dexterity? No. You won't. They're not exactly the same thing. We also have, we have these two different types of muscle fibers, right? We have fast twitch, we have slow twitch, and they work together, but they don't work like if you only train one, you lose the other. That's not how that happens. That's not how they're still going to be there. They are still there.
Even if it's like a percentage.
Yeah.
Even if
use
that
it
was
up on weights,
Do what?
Even if that was how it worked, are you really going to lift that frequently that you're going to overbalance your practice sessions? Is there really a pro musician out there who's going to do that? I don't think so.
Yeah.
I lift a lot and I don't know. No way.
It's interesting. Like I think somebody asked me, so what is it about the flute that makes it difficult for people that maybe they get injuries, or is it the weight? Is it now like more heavier than the wooden one? I'm like, no. I don't think it's the weight. I think it's just the posture, right? It's just horrible.
Yes.
Like in terms of as far as instruments go, I think it's like one of the worst.
One of the worst. Contort your body to play this metal stick. It's crazy. When we put it in silly terms like that, or like one of my former clients is a violist, and she's like, it's amazing what holding a block of wood under your neck for 30 years will do to you. And you're like, oh. Yeah, okay, when you say it that way, it makes sense. We're literally contorting our bodies around a metal stick.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's flute, guitar, and violin, viola, I think, are the three worst for injury rates. Although drums can
Percussion's pretty up there.
Yeah.
I would say that, well, we're talking about like a 90% rate. I mean, it really just depends on where you go. Yeah.
I think saxophone is probably one of the safest.
But then you get that, like I've heard.
Yeah, but then you
mentioning like the neck, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna argue
everything
against
is something.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'd say saxophones tend to hide it more or better. That's what I would say.
Well, clarinet?
Oh, we're all hurt.
We're all damaged.
I can tell you that oboists definitely are way up there, because if it's not about, especially when they play English horn, if it's not about the awkward nature of it, sitting here doing this all the time, making reeds, I don't envy them at all. I'll take my metal stick, thank you.
Right? Because I've been thinking like, oh my God, there are so many flute players like out there, like. But I really would not want to like be a double reed player. Like I'm so happy like with my choice. Like,
no offense to any double reed players, we just love you. We don't want to be you.
Correct.
But it's funny, I do notice like a lot of flute players are yoga teachers as well, or they delve into this like well-being, and I'm thinking like it's not an accident. No. Like that instrument just, it's kind of a catalyst. Like you have to start, being interested in it kind of thing. Yeah. When, you're playing such an asymmetrical instrument.
Yeah. It is. It is. That's a good point, because I think Christine is into Timani. Have you heard of Timani? That was a really interesting conversation trying to explain what that was. She's into Timani, but I think she also did yoga. I just thinking about all the flute players I know and how many of them do yoga. It's a high number. Yeah. So,
and sometimes like we talk about injuries, right? And I wouldn't recommend it, like going through an injury, but sometimes it can be a catalyst, like or an illness to actually because you have the best of intentions and you want to start, taking care of yourself, but sometimes you just don't have the, persistence, or, life gets in the way. But if you come across something like that, you just have to.
Yeah.
And after that, you don't want it to happen again. So in some ways, it can be sort of a way in to that whole like performance well-being. Not one I would recommend, but
yeah,
there's a silver lining, I guess.
Yeah, sometimes it takes something like that to make you care. Because I know the few people who I have met who claim to not have an injury. I'm going to use that word, claim.
Okay.
And it's because of how we define injury. But the few people I know who claim not to have one are it's almost like a status symbol.
Oh, not having an injury. Nice.
Not having an injury. There's maybe, actually, now I'm thinking about it, there's maybe one or two that don't have that, that don't have an injury and don't necessarily have, kind of tote it around like a status symbol. And that's fine in some ways. It's great to not be injured. I would have loved that. But to have a populace that is, we're estimating 90%, and I know people are going to go, well, this study says this, and if you really dig into it, 90% is a fair estimate, and I honestly think it's low end. But I think it's if we're going to split the difference, let's call it 90. So if you're working with a populace that's 90% injured and you don't have one, and then you start waving that around like a badge of honor, you're kind of contributing to the problem here. Like, what are you going to go do with your training? Are you going to go teach? Probably. You're probably going to teach at some point here. So if you're bringing that I've never been injured attitude to your lessons, right, where 90% of your students are going to be injured, what does that say to them?
Says you're less than. Says that it puts the blame on the student. It's when do we
whether or not they intend to.
Right. But like when do you blame an athlete for having an injury? It's just something that happens. There's
a lot of people who blame coaches.
Well, I mean, I don't mean like,
like, oh, it's the coach's fault that the athlete got hurt,
Right. But I mean,
we blame the teacher in that instance and not the student.
Right. But in music, so many times we blame the student. I'm thinking of like one of my brand ambassadors is a violist. Sorry. She's a violist, and her teacher basically, for years, she was in pain. She's a very small person, and she was in so much pain from playing this instrument. And her teacher told her, and this is in the last decade. This is not far in the past. This is recent. Her teacher just kept saying, well, you must not be good enough. You're just not practicing enough. You just need to work harder. Yeah. And it turns out her viola was too big for her. She finally got to the point where she's like, nope, I'm done. I know, Dad, you spent all this money on this viola. This is really important, but I hurt, and there's no reason for me. The viola was just too big for her. They bought it because of some certain situation. She felt like she couldn't get rid of it. So then she finally went, enough's enough, sold it, got an appropriately sized viola. And guess what? She's not in pain. But you just blame the musician? Why is that okay?
And I do think like maybe it's also about just shifting that sort of mindset of like injury or not, like defining your worth as a musician. It just is silly. And I do like, I did get somebody I was talking to, and they were actually a viola player, and they were asking me about tension and pain, and they were like, yeah, so do you ever feel pain like after playing your instrument? I'm like, yeah, sure. But I know how to get rid of it. Like I know how to manage it. Like I just don't go around being in pain and not knowing what to do. Yeah. But it doesn't mean like because you're a whatever, like for me, yoga teacher, right? You're perfect and you never hurt, or you cannot get injured, or it just doesn't work that way. But it's about knowing how to manage it, right? Because like even with the best posture in the world, like this is just not gonna like,
Yeah.
right? Like that's
Yeah.
not great.
Yeah.
Can mitigate,
Yeah.
but you have to manage it.
Exactly. And it takes upkeep the same way that we all still do our long tones, and we all still, it takes upkeep. Yes, as I get stronger, my playing gets easier and I end up less stiff, less hurt, whatever, and that's wonderful. But if you catch me playing a show and it's a, standard 5 nights a week, 3-hour show, at intermission, you're going to find me in the back of the pit doing all sorts of weird stuff.
Yeah.
Yep. Yes.
Yeah, not I mean stretching, but also like, okay, well, this is starting to tighten up, so let's move it. Let's,
Mhm.
air squats, weird stuff.
Yeah.
People looking at me like,
Yeah.
is she dying?
No,
No,
that
I
should
just
be
don't want to hurt.
normalized.
But
That
it
should
is that,
totally be normalized.
yeah, but it is that stigma, right? Because I find myself like going into a corner to do that, right? To do my whatever exercises. And I'm thinking like, my God, like you keep like sort of evangelizing to people about like, well-being.
Right.
But even
Right.
for me,
Right.
like, yeah, even for me, I think it's that stigma of like even being in pain and sort of broadcasting it, even though that's not the intention, right? But doing your exercises or stretches or, even for me, I have to sort of work through it and think like, okay, no, it's okay. It's just, it should be normal. And I really wish that people, and this is the way I teach my students, just, this is what you do 5 minutes before you play. And that's part of your practice time, right? And then you do like 2-3 minutes when you're done. And you count it into those 45 minutes that you do or whatever.
Yeah.
Because, it is important. Like you may be okay now when you're 16, but,
That doesn't mean it's going to last forever. But, I think the more we talk about it just like this, the more people listen to it and they start talking about it. We just have to start talking about it and stop this whole stigma business and stop putting the blame on ourselves as being weak for hurting. You're holding an instrument for hours a day times decades. Yeah, it's gonna hurt. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
It's wrong if you don't do something to prevent the injury that could happen from it. That's just negligence out of fear. And we shouldn't be teaching that.
Right, because like when you're even scared to do like a couple of exercises, when you're scared to talk about it, how can you really ask for help? Like how can you ask for a recommendation of, like you're gonna be scared to do that because it's a stigma.
Exactly. That's not okay.
So I'd like to use that, if this is a good time, to circle back to something you said earlier, Veronika, that I'm hoping would help, because what I'm running into more often now, because I talk about my stuff, like I'm not shy about it, but what I run into is students come to me and they're like, oh, well, this hurts and what can I do? And like, I can give them some at-home stuff, and then I give them the real answer, which is, this is a full body issue. We can work with the symptoms, but you have a full body issue. If you want to work on that and feel better overall, this is, like, come in, work with me once or twice, see what's up. You don't have to stay with me. I can send you to somebody else if this is not your jam. I don't mind. Like, I know what I do is not for everyone. But what I run into is that kind of like hesitation, and like, and they do the at-home stuff a couple times and I never hear anything about it until the next time it's really bugging them physically. So what I want to use that to ask about is, you said you went to your first strength training session and he had you doing deadlifts, and that was not what you were expecting. So what were you expecting, if you don't mind? What were you expecting, if you can remember? And then kind of how did that differ?
Well, I guess I wasn't expecting to work with a bar like that, right? Like I was maybe, and in the past, like that first like little training routine I had was working with machines. And I felt a little bit like, for me as a novice, kind of safer, because there's less you can do, wrong with that, because there's only so far it will go. you know, in one direction. You know, I still see people like doing some weird shit at the gym. Like really, I can't help it. And I know I shouldn't, you know,
we all do
make fun of it. But it's just like sometimes like using momentum and like doing this kind of thing. And I'm like, man, this is not gonna do anything for you. It's not like you're gonna throw your back. That's right. It's just
we applaud their effort that they are there trying.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, exactly.
But I guess I'm like, you know, that's why you would pay somebody to like actually show you what to do. And I think that for me, the way in, that was a big sort of help in that sense that I think for a lot of people when you told them to go to the gym or that they would be going to the gym, it's kind of daunting because they feel like, you know, people are watching, even though everybody's kind of minding their own business, right? I don't care like what you do, like do whatever you want. I'm just, you know, I'm concentrating on my counting or whatever. But yeah, it can be a bit scary at first. So actually having someone to tell you like, okay, this is the correct form and this is what you do exactly, like this is the plan. It's so much easier. And having actually someone walk alongside you and right, because I don't know if I would have stuck with it at the beginning because oh my god, it hurt like afterwards, you know, I wasn't used to it. But you know, the fact that I had those sessions I had every week at first, so yeah, that was I think that was really key, like somebody kind of cheering you on. But now I love it. Like I just don't want to be without it. Right now I know it works, so I don't need somebody to tell me that like I should go to the gym. I'm looking forward to going to the gym, but you know, it helps to have somebody actually guide you.
And that's what a good trainer is a guide. Yeah, you know. Yeah. So if you guys have ever heard of the book Building a Story Brand, which is about how you in business, how you talk to your potential clients and your patients or whatever. But everybody is on their own journey and they are the hero in their story. You are not the hero. They are. You are their guide. Every hero needs a guide. So if you think about every movie, if you think about Star Wars, who had, you know, I mean, everybody has a guide, right? You just need, there's nothing wrong with that. When you're a music student, your teacher is your guide. When you're in the gym, your trainer is your guide. You know, they're not the hero. You are.
And I think it's so important even when you like I teach yoga, but I would also like pay for people to guide me through like movement. Because I think it's so important. Like it doesn't really mean that once you finish your training, then you're on your own. Even like when you're a musician, right? That's another thing. Like people feel like now I'm a professional, I have a job, so I shouldn't be taking lessons because again, that's like a sign of weakness, right? I don't know what I'm doing. Well, no, it's just that, you know, it's so important, I think, to have somebody look at you from the outside because sometimes you're in your own head and it just, you know, it's so important, I think.
It can be really hard to be subjective about yourself, especially when it comes to movements as well. So whether you're with music or fitness, it's really nice to have, like you're saying, have that outside perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would pay for a personal trainer. I'm still trying to find the right one that fits me because you got to have the
then
right
it's one. Then it's about actually once you know more, you become very picky, you know.
Yes, and like I don't mind training myself, but like if I have to write myself a plan, I won't stick to it because I wrote it, and then I get in the gym, and go, I don't want to do this, and I actually need this, and then and there's something different about when you like you know, when you think about you really want to take a lesson with this person and they charge this what you think is a crazy amount. Yeah, but what's the benefit you're going to get out of it? Same thing with the trainer. It's like, if I actually pay somebody, I'm going to do it because they looked at me and went, you need this. And I paid for it. So I'm going to do it. And it's nice to not have to think, you know, to just like trust somebody else. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not a weakness. And it doesn't mean that you're less than because you're not following your own training or you're a musician taking lessons. We talked to Roy last week who played for Prince and is taking lessons.
My God. Yeah, of course. Like I think, yeah, there's that idea that you should just arrive at that destination and like, okay, now I'm perfect, now I'm professional. And yeah, taking a lesson is something like admitting a weakness or that you're not, good enough. It's silly. It's not the case.
Right.
Sorry, I went on a tangent there.
Yeah, I get that a lot as well.
I get on these rants and it's just like, this really grinds my gears. And I take that from, I don't even like Family Guy, but that's what really grinds my gears, It's just so funny. But yeah, so I agree. So there's nothing wrong with having a guide and having a teacher and trusting someone else to help you. You can't do everything yourself, and you're not going to be perfect. And life it's a journey. If you've already arrived, you might as well be dead.
Yep. And also, we shouldn't be like afraid to update our views, right? It doesn't mean that like discounts what you taught before or were doing before, because things are changing. Like you are allowed to evolve. Like it's fine. Yeah. It's fine to keep learning. It doesn't mean that you were bad before. It just means that you're like moving forward.
Right. And people will generally accept if you've changed an opinion about something. Or if you found something else along your path. Like I know a lot of people are like, oh, but I said to this person, so I can't change. Just tell them. Just tell them. Okay, I am not a good communicator when it comes to like feelings and messing up and whatever. And that became a learned behavior for me to just tell people. And now it's one of the things that I get younger people all the time, like, well, but I did this. Tell them. Just tell, but I forgot to pay, so just give them the check and tell them. It's always worked out. Like, people mostly are going to be fine as long as you're just like, look, my bad, or so I thought this, but then this, and so here we are, and this is where we're at now. So maybe that other thing I told you, like, it's probably not good anymore. Okay, no problem.
And also, like and also in this field, like you always have new research and things are actually moving forward all the time, right? I mean, it doesn't mean even that you were wrong. You were just following the advice that you got at the time. That's another thing. Like things do evolve as well.
That's perfect. So I think this is a good place to wrap up, but Veronika, thank you so much for joining us. And where can people find information about you?
So the easiest way is to go to musiciansyogawithveronika.com. So that's my website. And I'm also on Facebook, and I have a nice little Facebook group called Wellbeing for Musicians. And that's something that I actually really enjoy, because that's, all these things that we talk about, the stigma and people not talking about things and not being open about it, which I think make these issues so much worse when you think it's just you. Yeah. So this is sort of, the place where it's a private Facebook group so that they can be a little bit more open. Yeah. And I share some stuff there as well. But those are the main two things. Yeah.
Cool.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you for joining us. It's been a fantastic conversation.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. And thank you for what you're doing. It's really, I think it's really needed for people to hear.
And thank you for what you're doing.
Yep. Together we can make the difference.
We all change the world together. One conversation at a time, we're changing the world. That's the goal.
Yes.
Well, thank you. And you can find us on all the platforms and all the places. And we thank you for joining us, and have a great day.
Bye.